Okay, what we're going to go over here in this demonstration is proper use of a chisel. We're not going to really talk about techniques of using the chisel. We're simply going to talk about 3 rules that if you follow will be ensure that you use the chisel safely without cutting yourself or injuring yourself in some other way. The chisels here in the shop are decent quality chisels, and they're kept nice and sharp as we hopefully can. And what we want to do is to make sure that they stay sharp and that they don't cut you. There's 3 rules, and if you follow those 3 rules, you would make it very, very difficult to, in fact, cut yourself with a chisel. So rule number 1 is the work that you're going to work on, the wood stock, needs to be held in place by something other than your hands. So it needs to be clamped. So we have a bench vise. It's an easy tool to use to clamp it in place with. That's rule number 1, clamp your wood. Rule number 2, because you've clamped your wood, it means that both of your hands can be on the chisel. And if they're both on the chisel, it makes it very difficult to cut either one of your hands, which is the most common place where you cut yourself. Okay, so with both hands on the chisel, it means that we have a lot of control to work with it. Okay? Rule number 3, very simply, is to always push the chisel away from yourself. Okay? If you're pushing the chisel towards yourself, there's obviously a much greater chance that a slip will result in an injury to you. Obviously, we want to make sure that your friend is not sitting right next to you when you're chiseling away, because we also want to make sure we don't cut anybody else with the chisel, which is why we always ensure that we're spaced apart nicely, that we're not crowded at the workbench. Okay, so rule number 1, clamp your wood. Rule number 2, 2 hands on the chisel. Rule number 3, always push the chisel away from yourself. Okay. I'm going to show you a couple other ways of clamping the wood. We might not want to be working this edge. If we wanted to work this face, okay, we can use a C-clamp like this. And in order to do that, clamp has quite a bit of pressure, and we don't want to damage. This is fir, so it's soft wood. We don't want the clamp to leave a mark in our wood, so we just use a scrap piece of wood as a clamping caul. It puts more pressure on the wood as well, and we can clamp it to the bench just like this, okay, which again frees up our 2 hands so that we can have them both on the chisel, and we can work the wood, spin over here, and chisel away from ourselves once again. Right? Third way to clamp the wood, sometimes more versatile, is using the tab on the vise. Okay, so raise the tab up, lock it in place, and use a bench dog. Once we have the bench dog in place, we can bring the vise in, make sure the tab and the dog are below the level of the wood, clamp it up, and that's now in place like so, and we can chisel that way, we can chisel this way, and because the tab and the dog are below the surface of the wood, we're not going to accidentally bump our chisel into it and wreck our micro bevel on the sharp end. Okay, so again, 3 rules using the chisel is clamp your wood, 2 hands on the chisel, and push away from your body. Last technique, there is one time when you have to have 1 hand on the chisel only, and that's when we do chopping and paring. So if we want to make a mortise or a square hole in this wood, then we're going to likely use a mallet to give ourselves that extra advantage. The chisel needs to be held straight up and down. We'll talk about this technique later on, proper technique for this, but simply safely is we hold our chisel at the shoulder with 1 hand, the chisel's not moving, and our mallet is held in our other hand, our dominant hand, and that allows us to chop it and to pare it. So again, holding it in 1 hand and nice light taps. So again, both our hands are occupied, we're never chiseling towards ourselves, and again, 1 hand on the chisel only in that instance. That's the only time that we would do that. It's the only exception to that rule.